Alright guys, today we're going to talk about the greatest hound from the Fate franchise, Cu Chulainn. His story starts off with his mother Dechine. One day, the sun god Lug appears in front of her and said, "I'ma need you to bear my child." The god then tells Dechine that their child's name will be Setanta, and she goes through with the process. Dechine, however, wanted this child to be raised up by the men of Ulster. So she discussed it with these men, and they ended up making such a big deal about it that they were real life about to fight over who was gonna be Cu's foster father. Eventually, they had a judge come in and decide that Dechine's real husband would foster the child first. And once the child has become of age, everybody else could pitch in any knowledge that they might have later on down the line. Fergus, who is also a servant from the franchise, is one of these foster parents, and his portion of the fostering was instructing Cu how to do battle. Now, when Cu was still just a young boy, he always talked about how he wanted to join the boys' troop of the Red Branch Knights, the Red Branch being somewhat of the Irish counterpart to the Knights of the Round. But every time he tried to bring this up, his mother, of course, looking out for his safety, said, "I can't let you do that, you're too young." Eventually, it got to the point where Cu couldn't contain himself any longer. He sneaks out in the middle of the night while everybody was still asleep and showed up to the Red Branch Castle while the boy troops were in the middle of a game of hurling. Hurling, for the most part, being an Irish equivalent to the sport hockey. So Cu shows up, he steals the ball from them, and he's pretty much just out there trolling, enticing them to try to steal the ball back. But since he's a demigod and all, he's naturally more endowed in terms of physique. So the boys couldn't do it. Now they're starting to get pissed off. Like, who the hell is this dude anyway? And why is he here? So the boys said, you know what? Screw the game. Everybody attack him at once. All 150 of them. And they still couldn't touch him. King Connor, who was the leader of the Red Branch, came out into the field and broke up the situation. Hey, get off the boy. I can't even play a game of chess, y'all out here cutting up. The king then tells Cu, you can't just show up doing anything you want. These boys are out for blood. You want to be a part of us? You got to introduce yourself, son. Now, normally the person who was about to join the organization would pledge to the members who were already in it. But since Cu was so superior to all the boys that were on the field, he made the boys pledge to him, and he became the youngest member of the Red Branch boy troops that same night. So we fast forward a year later, and the king has asked Cu to come to a feast that was being hosted by his friend, Culann. Cu tells the king, I'm in the middle of a game right now, I'll slide through once everything is over. This didn't work out too well for him. Apparently, the king was so invested in the feast that he forgot to tell Culann that Cu was on his way. Normally, that wouldn't be a problem, but looking out for the safety of his guests, Culann had unleashed a vicious guard dog to protect them while they were inside. I'm not sure I like these odds. This guard dog in particular was said to be the most dangerous dog in all of Ireland. Definitely don't like these odds. The dog was said to be the size of a baby horse and had the strength of at least 10 men. A baby horse? The fuck y'all been feeding this nigga, goddamn. So the moment that Cu showed up, the dog attacked him. The only thing that Cu had on him at the time was the same stick and ball that he used to play hurley. In the Fate version, it stated that he just strangled the dog to death. In the original myth, and the one I find to be a lot more believable, Cu threw the ball down the dog's throat and approached it as he began to choke. He then picks the dog up by its hind legs, slams it on the ground, and bangs his skull into a rock until the beast was no longer. Once the situation was over, Culann rushed out to the scene only to find out that his beloved doggo was taking the good old dirt nap. He was devastated. He told Cu that, "I'm really glad to see that you're okay, but I think you should leave immediately." Feeling responsible for Culann's loss, Cu tells the man that he wanted to make things right again. He tells Culann that he should raise another dog, and until that dog is fully grown, Cu will be his new guard dog in his place. It was at this point that he changed his name from Setanta to Cu Chulainn. Cu Chulainn literally meaning the Hound of Culann. And each day for the next year, Cu would make his way over to Culann's house and stand guard for any intruders until nightfall, just as he promised. Fast forward down the road and we enter a segment where Cu takes up his first arms. The king's father stated that if someone were to take up arms today, you wouldn't live a long life, but your name would last forever. Cu's in the background like, "You don't say." So Cu rushes over to the king and asked him could he have his first weapon. The king decided to loan him his own weapons and even gave him his chariot so he'd have a new ride. And he didn't waste any time. He immediately went out and beheaded 3 warriors from another region just to prove that he was that guy when he stepped on the field. With Cu being able to amass so many achievements at a young age, he was seen as the pinnacle of the Red Branch Knights. This newfound popularity soon brought all the women running to his side, but he didn't care about them. The one that he really wanted was a girl by the name of Emer. Her father, on the other hand, was not too fond of the idea of Cu piping out his daughter. Can't say I blame him. So in response, her father dresses up in a disguise and showed up to a meeting that was being held at the Red Branch Castle. And out of nowhere, in the middle of the meeting, dude was like, "You know, it's such a shame that none of these guys have went to train with Skyhawk. The idea here is that just getting to Skyhawk was such a rigorous task that Cu would just end up dying on the way and he wouldn't have to worry about it." Cu did, however, make it over in one piece. He goes over to the Land of Shadows where Skyhawk is located, and she took him in as her pupil the moment that he got there. Once this session was over, he was even rewarded with his signature weapon, the Gay Bull. Now, before Cu was able to go back to his homeland, Skyhawk wanted him to face off against one of her greatest enemies, this being her twin sister, Aife. He defeated her just like they planned, and in the Fate verse, she submitted herself to Cu, allowing him to shoot her club up and get her pregnant. This man gives Aife a ring and told her, "When the child gets old enough, you tell them to come find me, I'll be waiting." And then he dips out. Best father in the Nasu verse, hands down. So he wraps up his training, makes his way back to his homeland, and what does he find? Emer is now being held in a tower just so her father could ensure that Cu couldn't reach her. You really pulling out all the stops there, aren't you, Pops? Long story short, Cu makes it around all of his defenses, eliminates any guard that may have crossed his path, takes Emer from the tower, and the two ended up getting married later on down the road. We now come to the portion where Queen Maeve, the Thought, makes her invasion on Ulster in search of the brown bull of Cuchulainn. At the time, Fergus had defected to Maeve's army due to a beef he had with King Connor involving the death of his 2 sons. And to make things even worse, the entire army was under a curse that prevented them from going out into battle and protecting their region. Since Cu had been a child that was originally from somewhere else, he was unaffected by this curse, and the only one that stood a chance when it came to fighting against Maeve's army. As such, he slaughters a numerous amount of her people, pushing her into a tight spot. She was well aware of how things would turn out if Cu was able to keep this up, so she decided to strike a deal. She told Cu that she will use hand-picked champions from her own nation to fight him one-on-one in a ford that was near Ulster. Cu takes up this challenge as he felt as if this wouldn't do her any justice either way. The young boys from Ulster were also unaffected by the curse, and they heard about the heroic display that Cu was putting on in the war. So they tried to help him in place of their cursed fathers, and they were all slaughtered right down to the very last child. When Cu found out about this tragedy, he went into a fit of rage, taking down even more soldiers than he was before. He dealt with a powerful sorcerer named Cuchulain that fused himself with 27 of his sons and became a monster. He also had to deal with the meddling of the war goddess Morrigan in the midst of everything else. Maeve eventually came to the conclusion that this one-on-one thing, yeah, this isn't working for us, so we're just gonna ambush you instead. Even after breaking her side of the bargain, they still couldn't bring Cu to his knees. Finally, Maeve decides to resort to her ace in the hole, Ferdiad, who was also Cu's foster brother. The two battled for days, and as much as he didn't want to fight Ferdiad, Cu knew that it was no use in prolonging the inevitable. This is when he entered a warp spasm. His body became twice its regular size, his hair became fitted with massive spikes, and the hero light hovered like a thick fog across the top of his head. Towards the end of this battle, Cu picks up his gable by using his foot to snatch it off the ground. He then thrusted it through the body of Ferdiad, piercing his heart and putting an end to his life in the process. It was around this time that the curse was finally lifted, and Ulster continued to battle Maeve's army for several years. At long last, the war comes to a close, with Cu allowing Maeve to escape back to her kingdom due to him not being a fan of harming women if he can avoid doing so. Years pass, and Cu gets word that a man has showed up on the shore of Bale Strand, throwing hands with anybody that he meets. He goes down to the shore to check out the situation and asks the boy who he was. However, the young warrior stressed that he couldn't reveal his name due to a sacred vow that he received before he got there. The two of them then faced off in battle, which ended when Cu hurled his spear and shredded off one side of the boy's body. As the warrior tumbled to the ground, he began to hold up the very same ring that Cu left Aife a long time ago. It was at that moment that he soon realized that this man was his own son, Conla. Turns out that Aife sent him to get revenge after she found out about Cu's marriage. He falls to the ground with his son, grabbing a hold of his injured body. And since he got hit with the gable, the wound was fatal, forcing Cu's hand to end Conla's suffering by slitting his throat. Yikes! Cu was crushed. The king was so afraid that Cu might take out this anger on his own people that they put a spell on him that made him go to the coast and take out his frustration there instead. So for 3 days and 3 nights, Cu stood on the coast of Bale Strand, swinging at the waters relentlessly until he passed out from exhaustion. Unfortunately for him, things weren't about to get any easier. With Cu being the new champion of Ulster, there were a lot of people in the past who tried to challenge him for his position. And once again, he had to show them who's the real boss. Eventually, the children of all the people he had put down, including Maeve, got together and started to conspire against him. Yeah, that's right, Maeve. You know, the same one he let go. You should have killed the bitch. So they send a messenger to Cu telling him that there's a huge battle that's about to come up. Whatever you do, don't go out and fight this battle on your own. However, the daughter to one of his challengers took the form of a noble and told him if he doesn't go into the field right now, Ulster will be ruined. So he hits the road with the quickness and crosses paths with even more enemies. This time, it was 3 witches. They offered him the shoulder blade of a dog, claiming that if he didn't eat it, he was too stuck up. This was all a part of their plan. See, they knew that Cu had self-declared vows that he wasn't allowed to break. One of these vows being that he couldn't eat the flesh of a hound, and one of his other vows being that he couldn't refuse hospitality. So if he took the dog meat, he'd be cursed. And if he didn't take the dog meat, he'd still be cursed. There was no way out. So he eats the meal, and the moment that he does this, he starts to lose feeling in the hand that he took it with. And he also lost feeling in the left thigh that he sat the food on. Now that he's been cursed, everything was about to go downhill from here. He gets back into his chariot and continued down the road until he runs into yet another enemy. This time, it was a man by the name of Ulaid. This was due to the fact that Cu had beheaded his father back in the day. So Ulaid sends out 3 members from his entourage and told them to ask Cu could they borrow his spear. Cu knew for certain that these men were up to no good, so he denies their request and responded by spearing them all through the face. Each time he took one of their lives, Ulaid picked up Cu's spear and answered his assault by taking the life of a king using his own weapon. The first attack killed his friend Ulaid, king of charioteers. The second attack killed Cu's steed, Liamaka, king of the horses. The third and final strike hit Cu across his stomach, blowing out his insides and putting him in a fatal position. Of course, Cu didn't want to go out like no sucker, so he tied himself to a tall stone that was nearby, sometimes with his own intestines. This allowed Cu to die against the stone standing and go out with a little more dignity than he would have had otherwise. That about wraps it up. If you enjoyed the video, please like it up so we can get this trending. Feel free to add information as you see fit, and let me know what you guys think about it.